FC Barcelona's season was a war.
Obligado a reaccionar el Real Madrid, pero Robert Lewandowski!
A true tactical, emotional, and symbolic battle that brought back the intensity of those days when Mourinho and Guardiola split the world in two. It was a war of Clásicos, of history, of pride. And as in every great story, there was an unexpected winner. The team coming out of a crisis. The team that seemed destined to survive, not to dominate. Because while Real Madrid arrived as La Liga and Champions League champions, boasting the star signing of Kylian Mbappe as their new Galactico weapon.
1, 2, 3, ¡a la Madrid!
Barca could only present a new name on the bench, Hansi Flick. No blockbuster signings, no media frenzy, just a coach who understood the game, and that was enough to change everything.
Rafinha que pica el balón, puede caer otro, la vaselina!
The first Clasico of the season was a declaration of war. At the Santiago Bernabeu itself, Barca hit Real Madrid with a 0-4. Lamine Yamal made history. He became the youngest player to ever score in a Clasico. And it wasn't a lucky punch, it was a masterclass, a tactical humiliation, a warning shot. The second clash, the Spanish Super Cup final, was even more brutal. Barca won 5-2 with a footballing display that left Madrid without answers, without structure, without a soul. Every pass, every transition, every high press was a work of art drawn by Flick and executed with surgical precision by his players. The third showdown came in the Copa del Rey final, and once again Barca came out on top, this time with a 3-2 win full of twists, emotions, and total resilience. It didn't matter if Madrid struck first, Barca always responded, with football, with character, with identity. And finally in the fourth Clásico, with La Liga on the line, Barca won again. 4 Clásicos, 4 wins, 16 goals scored, historic thrashings, unforgettable displays. What no one saw coming, what everyone feared to admit, came true. Barca didn't just rise again. They became the absolute tormentor of the most feared club in Europe. And all of that began with a change on the bench. Because while Madrid's big signing was Mbappe, Barca's real game changer was Hansi Flick. Last season, Real Madrid was a perfect machine. They won everything. La Liga champions with 95 points, unbeaten Champions League winners, and a squad that blended youth, experience, and hunger for titles. In Spain, they were the top scorers and the best defense. 87 goals for, just 26 conceded. Unstoppable. In Europe, they left no stone unturned, knocking out Manchester City with authority. Destroying Bayern Munich, humiliating Dortmund in Wembley,
Vinicius, goal!
perfect Champions League run, 28 goals scored, only 15 conceded. Madrid didn't just win, they dominated, and the stars burned with white-hot intensity. Vinicius Jr. had his best season yet, 25 goals, 12 assists, and a dribbling threat that terrified every defence in the world. His unpredictability made him a constant nightmare. Jude Bellingham, the English jewel, arrived as a promise and became an unstoppable force from midfield. 23 goals and 13 assists as a box-to-box machine, with a dominant physique, tactical brilliance, and a personality that matched the crest on his chest. But beyond individual numbers, Madrid had an unshakable structure, a midfield packed with talent: Kroos, Modric, Camavinga, Valverde, Tchouaméni. A solid backline with Rudiger, Nacho, Carvajal, Mendy. 2 elite goalkeepers in Courtois and Lunin. They were the most complete team on the planet. And as if that weren't enough, the summer brought the ultimate bombshell: Kylian Mbappe.
1, 2, 3, ¡a la Madrid!
World Cup winner, World Cup runner-up in Qatar, second all-time top scorer in League One, a global icon, the spiritual heir to Cristiano Ronaldo. With him, Madrid became more than a team. They became a prophecy of eternal dominance. Everything pointed to a new white dynasty, a reign that would last years. Who could stop them? Who would even dare compete? While Real Madrid was living its golden era since 2016, FC Barcelona was going through one of the darkest crises in its history. It wasn't just about money, about being unable to compete for the market's biggest stars. The real issue was structural, emotional, and football-related. There was no certainty on the bench. Ernesto Valverde, despite winning La Liga titles, became synonymous with painful Champions League failures. Quique Setién oversaw one of the most humiliating chapters in club history, the historic thrashing by Flick's Bayern, that 8-2 that left a lasting scar on every Barca fan. Then came Ronald Koeman, who barely salvaged a Copa del Rey despite having names like Messi, Griezmann and Dembélé. With Xavi Hernandez, a spark of hope was lit. Barcelona won La Liga in 2022-23 and young players who are now pillars made their debuts. Lamine Yamal, Fermín López, Pau Cubarsí. But the football didn't flow. It was predictable, positional but without intention, possession without depth. The feeling was clear. The team played without a soul. In Europe, Barca had become a second-tier side. 2 consecutive seasons falling into the Europa League, knocked out by Eintracht Frankfurt and Ten Hag's Manchester United. And when they finally reached the Champions League quarter-finals, Luis Enrique's PSG dismantled them mercilessly. Barca simply couldn't compete at the highest level. It wasn't about the names, it was about the system.
Creo sinceramente que sin la expulsión también hubiéramos ganado este partido. Pero eso tampoco lo puedo demostrar.
And in Spain, even though they resisted, Madrid's dominance was total. The 2023/24 season was a harsh reality check. 3 Clásicos, 3 defeats. In Montjuic, Bellingham silenced the stadium with a brace to secure a well-earned 2-1 win. In the Supercopa final, Vinicius Jr. scored a hat-trick to make it clear who ruled Spain. And at the Bernabeu, even though Barca held on with 2 goals, Madrid won 3-2 with authority. It was a season of nothingness. No trophies, no style, no direction. And that was the moment Barca hit rock bottom. But like in every great story, that was also the moment something changed, because that's when Hansi Flick arrived on the bench. The Hansi Flick era didn't begin with applause or euphoria, quite the opposite. In his first match as Barcelona's head coach, he lost the Joan Gamper trophy to Monaco, and the press wasted no time sounding the alarms. Social media burned with pessimism. It seemed like nothing had changed. Only Dani Olmo had been signed, and the new coach, despite having won a sextuple with Bayern, was a stranger to many Barca fans. He wasn't from the club, he didn't speak Catalan, he didn't seem to carry the Barca DNA. But the moment the official season began, everything changed. Flick's Barcelona was, from match day 1, a tactical and emotional steamroller. They started with terrifying ease: 7-0 against Valladolid, 4-1 against Girona, 5-1 over Villarreal, 3-0 against Alaves, 5-1 against Sevilla. In the Champions League, they smashed Young Boys 5-0 and destroyed Bayern Munich 4-1. But more important than the numbers was the football. It was the way they played. For the first time in years, Barca played with intensity, with aggression, dominated the ball with purpose, and won while doing it. Hansi Flick didn't just change the system, he changed the mindset. He built a vertical, aggressive, offensive football that brought joy back to the fans. No more sterile possession, no more fear. Barca attacked, pressed, entertained, and crushed. It was a quiet revolution, and at the same time, unstoppable. Lamine Yamal was the brightest jewel of all. The 17-year-old became the best young player in the world, scoring, assisting, and dribbling as if he had spent a decade in the elite. His impact was so overwhelming that nobody saw him as a promise anymore. He was already a full-fledged star. Pedri, finally free from injuries, returned to being that magical midfielder who controlled the tempo of matches with the calm of a genius. He connected play, reached the box, distributed passes. He was Xavi and Iniesta fused into a single player. Flick also revived players who had seemed lost. Rafinha was transformed into a lethal, technical, and reliable winger. Lewandowski found his prime again, a scorer, solid, decisive. Dani Olmo became an immediate impact signing. He didn't just deliver, he shone. But the revolution didn't stop there. In defence, Flick bet on courage. Marc Casado earned the starting pivot role with a maturity well beyond his years. Inigo Martinez, combining grit with passing ability, became arguably the best centre-back in the world for large parts of the season. Pau Cubarsí rose to prominence as the new Piqué. Jules Koundé evolved into the best right-back on the continent. And Alejandro Balde became a relentless force down the left flank. In just 10 league games, Barcelona scored 33 goals. But beyond the numbers, what changed was the soul of the team. Flick didn't just give them tactical structure, he gave them back their pride, their confidence, and their hope. This wasn't just another Barca, this was the return of the Barca that makes the world fall in love. And it was ready to dominate again. Real Madrid began the season with their flag of hope flying high. They were coming off a Champions League and La Liga double. They had just signed Kylian Mbappe, the best footballer in the world at that moment. And not just him, they had also brought in Brazilian wonder kid Endrick, a lethal striker with maturity well beyond his years. For many, this new version of Madrid was destined to dominate world football. Their first test was the UEFA Super Cup against Atalanta, and Madrid delivered with authority. Mbappe and Vinicius, on fire, led a comfortable 2-0 victory to lift the season's first trophy. Everything pointed towards Madrid, steamrolling the competition from day one. But the illusion didn't last long. Cracks began to show almost immediately. Toni Kroos's departure left a massive hole in midfield that neither Tchouaméni nor Camavinga could fully fill, and bad luck didn't help. Eder Militao, just back from injury, tore his ACL again after being rushed into action. Days later, Dani Carvajal suffered the same fate against Villarreal. Madrid, without its usual defensive structure, looked exposed. Still, no one panicked. They had firepower up front, but their early La Liga results were unsettling. A 1-1 draw against Mallorca, another against Las Palmas, and a third against Atletico Madrid. It wasn't a crisis, but it wasn't dominance either. The issue wasn't about talent, it was about cohesion. Mbappe and Vinicius couldn't find synergy. The most feared duo in football was raising more questions than answers. In their first 10 league matches, Madrid scored 21 goals. Mbappe had 6, Vinicius 5. Decent stats, but far from the level expected from players meant to conquer Europe. And in the Champions League, things didn't look better. They lost 1-0 to Lille, looking sluggish and disconnected. Then came Dortmund, who put 2 past them in the first half. Though Madrid mounted a classic comeback, Vinicius scored a hat-trick to make it 5-2. It didn't feel impressive. Doubts were piling up. The fans could sense it. The media knew it. The team wasn't clicking. They weren't playing badly, but not well either. And then came the true test. The match everyone had circled in red on their calendar. October 26th. The first Clasico of the season. On October 26th, Barcelona walked into the Santiago Bernabeu and turned it into a house of horrors, a ruthless 4-0 demolition. A result that not only shocked the football world, it shifted the emotional and competitive momentum of the entire season. In that match, Hansi Flick showed he had studied every inch of Ancelotti's Madrid. He hadn't come to Barca to survive. He came to dominate. Flick's key move was a daringly high defensive line, risky but perfectly executed. Mbappe, Madrid's megastar, was completely nullified. He was caught offside 8 times and had 2 goals ruled out. Barcelona gambled on anticipation, on calculated risk, and it paid off. But the most shocking part wasn't just the defense, it was the way Barca attacked. Lightning-fast transitions, pinpoint passes between the lines, clinical speed. Every play was a dagger to Madrid's heart. The first goal was tactical chess. Marc Casado picked up the ball in midfield and lifted his head. Rafinha, abandoning his wing, slid into the central channel alongside Pedri, just behind Madrid's midfield and defence. Meanwhile, Lamine Yamal stayed wide right, dragging defenders with him. Casado spotted that Rudiger and Militao were stepping up to play the offside trap, but Mendy and Lucas Vazquez had lagged behind. Casado delivered a perfect through ball. Lewandowski was one-on-one with Lunin. Goal. The Bernabeu fell silent. The second goal exposed Madrid's defensive disarray again. Balde received on the left and swung in a perfect cross. Lewandowski, completely unmarked, split the centre-backs and headed it home. Where were Rudiger and Militao? No one knew. 0-2. Madrid looked disconnected, disorganised, destroyed. The third goal was even more telling. Flick knew Lucas Vazquez was the system's weak link. Barca attacked down his side once more. Rafinha burned him for pace, reached the byline and fired in a low cross. Everyone expected Lamine Yamal to dribble. Instead, the 17-year-old fired a first-time shot. Precise, low, devastating. A right-footed rocket. 0-3. Madrid had no answers. And the fourth goal. It was the final nail in the coffin. Same formula. Long ball behind Lucas Vazquez. Rafinha outran him with ease, raced into the box and calmly chipped Lunin with a cheeky finish. 0-4. The scoreline was brutal, but the real brutality was in Barca's tactical and emotional superiority. After the first league Clasico and the humiliation of Real Madrid at the Bernabeu, Barcelona entered an unexpected storm. November and December were an absolute nightmare for Hansi Flick's team. The football that dazzled the world during the first third of the season began to fade. Mistakes piled up, legs grew heavy, and confidence, which once seemed endless, began to run low. Barca dropped key points, and with them, the lead. They lost to Real Sociedad, drew against Celta Vigo, fell to Las Palmas, drew again with Betis, were stunned by Leganés, and finally suffered a 2-1 blow from Atlético de Madrid that left them third in the standings, behind Madrid and Atleti. The league seemed to be slipping through their fingers. Meanwhile, Real Madrid was still trying to recover after the emotional hit from the Clasico. But then something unexpected happened. Vinicius Jr. suffered a muscle injury, and in his absence, Kylian Mbappé found freedom. For the first time since his arrival, the Frenchman wasn't sharing the spotlight. He started to look comfortable, unleashed, and at times truly unstoppable. Madridistas found new hope in their star, and so came the second Clasico, the Spanish Super Cup final, a match that was expected to be much closer than the first. Madrid came in with more confidence, with Mbappé in top form, while Barca were just starting to get some of their key players back. To cover Iñaki Peña's absence, the club signed Szczęsny as their new goalkeeper. Everything pointed toward a tight match, but once again, the result was a Blaugrana storm. Despite an early goal by Mbappé in the 10th minute, a lightning-fast transition, Barcelona didn't lose their shape, they ignited. Flick had a plan, and like the great tacticians, he executed it with surgical precision. Barca pressed high with a synchronized, aggressive 4-3-3. Lamine Yamal, Lewandowski and Gavi formed a front line that closed down every Madrid outlet. That pressure completely shut down Real Madrid's midfield. Tchouaméni, Valverde and Camavinga were overrun time and time again. Every error in Madrid's build-up was a golden opportunity for Barca, and they didn't miss. But the real brilliance was in their offensive transitions. Every ball recovery turned into an attack within seconds. Flick had erased the useless passive possession of the past and replaced it with vertical, electric football full of purpose. Rafinha and Lamine Yamal sliced through the lines like razors. Pedri conducted play like an orchestra maestro, and Lewandowski found his prime form in the box. Madrid's defence, slow, disjointed, poorly organised, couldn't cope. The massive gaps between midfield and defence were a feast for Barcelona. No matter how much Valverde, Camavinga or Ceballos tried to close down spaces, the Blaugrana's pace overwhelmed them. 1, 2, 3, 5 goals, a 5-2 demolition that made it very clear who ruled Spanish football. After lifting the Supercopa with an unforgettable performance, Barcelona reached a brutal level of form once again. The statement win against Real Madrid wasn't a coincidence, it was a warning, a turning point. Barca began an unstoppable run of games, and the football they played was simply irresistible. They thrashed Valencia 7-1, and from that moment on, they went unbeaten in 13 consecutive matches, only drawing once, against Betis. The rest was a Blaugrana storm that swept across all of Spain. 4-1 against Sevilla, 4-0 against Real Sociedad, 4-2 against Atletico Madrid, in a thrilling match that returned them to the top of the table, 3-0 against Osasuna, 4-1 against Girona, and a wild 4-3 over Celta. In the Copa del Rey, Barca kept up their attacking momentum. They destroyed Betis 5-1 in the round of 16 and crushed Valencia 5-0 in the quarter-finals. In the semi-finals, they faced Atletico Madrid in an epic showdown. A historic comeback gave them a ticket to the final. The hunger in this team was non-negotiable. Barca was back, and they were back to win. In the Champions League, Flick's team also displayed their best European form in years. Benfica fell in the round of 16 with absolute clarity. In the quarterfinals, Dortmund was crushed 4-0 in the first leg. In the return leg, although the Germans won 4-1, the aggregate score favoured Barca, who justly advanced to the semi-finals. There they faced Inter Milan. In the second leg, after 120 minutes of play and a flood of emotions, the match ended 3-3. A legendary game that confirmed the team's attacking power and the rise of an unstoppable Lamine Yamal, who was already being hailed as the best young player on the planet. Meanwhile, Real Madrid was struggling on every front. In the Copa del Rey, their troubles began as early as the round of 16. Celta de Vigo pushed them to extra time, where Endrick stepped up as a hero with a last gasp winner. In the quarterfinals, humble Leganés nearly pulled off a shock. Madrid barely scraped through with a 3-2 win, hanging on by a thread. In the semi-finals, Real Sociedad scored 4 goals at Anoeta. Only a narrow 1-0 win in the first leg allowed Madrid to advance. The 5-4 aggregate felt like pure luck. In the Champions League, Madrid's journey was a nightmare. They were humiliated by Liverpool at Anfield, lost 2-1 at home to Milan in one of the worst performances of the Ancelotti era. They barely eliminated the weakest Manchester City side of the Guardiola era in the play-in round. In the round of 16, they defeated Atletico Madrid on penalties thanks to a technical violation by Julian Alvarez that disallowed his kick. It was a controversial and uninspiring qualification, but everything ended in the quarterfinals. Declan Rice's Arsenal dismantled them at the Emirates with a 3-0 that sucked the life out of the Madrid squad. In the second leg, with a team void of ideas or energy, Arsenal finished the job with a 2-1 win. The aggregate was brutal, 5-1, one of the harshest eliminations in the club's recent history. Madrid was out of the league race, out of the Champions League, and only had the Copa del Rey left. But the opponent in the final was the same team that had already taken everything from them this season, Barcelona, the executioner who had exposed them time and again. The third battle was about to begin, and it seemed like it would be the final one. In the third Clasico of the season, FC Barcelona once again wrote a golden chapter in its recent history. They were crowned champions of the 2024/25 Copa del Rey after defeating Real Madrid in an epic final that had absolutely everything: comebacks, drama, key players, and above all, character. Because beyond the trophy, what made this Barca great was its ability to bounce back from adversity, to play with identity when everything seemed to slip away, and to showcase Hansi Flick's footballing vision on the pitch. From the start, the plan was clear. Barca came out to dominate possession, but it wasn't sterile possession. Every pass had a purpose, every circulation had intent. Pedri pulled the strings, Frenkie de Jong provided passing lanes, Dani Olmo broke between the lines, and Lamine Yamal brought the magic down the right wing. The tactical structure was solid, and the ball flowed between the midfielders like a symphony. Real Madrid slowly began to retreat, unable to break Barca's territorial dominance. While there weren't many clear-cut chances, the psychological control of the match already belonged to the Blaugrana, and it showed in a goal that gave them the lead going into half-time. But the second half told a different story. Madrid adjusted their lines, pushed their block higher, and pressed with more intensity. In just 5 minutes, they turned the match around. A double strike that seemed to drain the energy from Barcelona and ignite the white narrative. For a few minutes, the game looked completely Real Madrid's, but then came Flick's signature move, the perfectly timed adjustments. In the 65th minute, Fermin Lopez came on for Dani Olmo, and with him came energy, rebellion, and fire. Ferran began to move freely, Yamal recovered his space, and Rafinha started appearing inside again. Firmín's runs from deep shattered Madrid's defensive shape. Barca regained the initiative, possession had purpose again, and space reopened. Then Lamine Yamal turned into a legend. The 17-year-old took the weight of the match on his shoulders and handled it like someone with a decade of Clásicos under his belt. First, he assisted Ferran Torres to equalise. Then, in extra time, he delivered another piece of magic so Jules Koundé could fire home the winning goal. Real Madrid, exhausted and out of answers, fell apart. Barca hadn't just won a final. They had reaffirmed an idea, a style, a present. Hansi Flick had restored the competitive pride, the belief, and most importantly, the feeling that this team never gives up. What once looked like a transition season was now turning into an epic. The treble was closer than ever. All that remained was to overcome Inter Milan in San Siro. There was still one more Clasico to play, but before that, Barcelona had to climb one last mountain to reach the Champions League final and keep the dream of a treble alive. The obstacle was Inter Milan, and the Italians proved to be the toughest opponent of the entire season. In a highly demanding first half, the Nerazzurri went ahead with 2 goals, showcasing overwhelming tactical solidity. Barca looked stunned, but what happened in the second half was a true display of character. Eric Garcia, Dani Olmo, and Rafinha led a heroic comeback. In the 87th minute, with the score 3-2, the ticket to the final was almost sealed. But then Ronald Araujo's mistake struck again. 2 defensive lapses allowed Inter to equalise and then score the winner in the dying moments. The treble dream vanished in an instant. It was a devastating blow, but even in elimination, Barca walked away with respect, dignity, and a style of football that had enamoured all of Europe. And one last battle remained, the 4th Clasico of the season, the duel that would decide La Liga, the match that would define everything. Real Madrid knew this was their last shot at redemption. Barcelona knew it was the final step to close out a historic campaign. The stadium was a furnace, the atmosphere electric, and the beginning was a nightmare. Kylian Mbappe capitalised on 2 defensive errors, and in just 15 minutes Madrid was up 0-2, a white avalanche that looked irreversible. But what came next was another masterclass by Flick. Barca didn't lose their heads. They stuck to their plan, pushed higher, adjusted their pressing, and began to dominate the ball like a symphony of passes. From a corner, Ferran Torres flicked it on, and Eric Garcia scored from close range. 1-2. That's when everything changed. Barca equalised and then turned it around in under 15 minutes. Lamine Yamal, unstoppable as always, fired in a left-footed strike to make it 2-2. Rafinha, after relentless pressure, stole the ball and made it 3-2. Before halftime, another press, a combination with Varane, and Rafinha scored again, 4-2. They had conceded 2 and scored 4 in half an hour. A furious, tactical and emotional comeback. The second half only confirmed Barca's superiority. Real Madrid tried to respond, but they were disorganised. Mbappe scored to make it 4-3 with an assist from Vinicius, completing a historic hat-trick. That wasn't enough to win. He became the first player to score 3 goals in a Clasico and still lose. That stat perfectly sums up Real Madrid's season. Dependent on one star with no real support, the difference was in the systems. The Pedri-Frenkie double pivot controlled midfield. Dani Olmo, as number 10, connected the lines. Lamine and Rafinha pinned the fullbacks, stretched the pitch and tore Madrid apart from the wings. Varane, as a false 9, dragged defenders. Everything flowed. Madrid, meanwhile, was a mess. Tchouaméni and Asensio out of sync. Bellingham lost. Ceballos, Güler and Modric ineffective. Ancelotti had no answers from the bench, but the biggest difference was Barca's counter-press. The third and fourth goals came from high-pressure recoveries. First, Pedri stole the ball from Ceballos and assisted Rafinha. Then Varane pressed Lucas Vázquez, combined with Olmo, and the Brazilian scored. That's Flick's Barca. Vertical, aggressive, lethal. Real Madrid never found order. Not when they were ahead, not when they chased the game. They depended solely on Mbappe. Vinicius vanished. Bellingham was irrelevant. Madrid was outclassed tactically, physically and mentally. And if that wasn't enough, the Clasico was drenched in controversy. In the 5th minute, a penalty was awarded to Mbappe. Kubasi miscontrolled the ball, and the Frenchman, in an offside position, was fouled by Szczęsny. The referee didn't call the offside, claiming the defender's mistake reset the play. Debatable, but acceptable. But then came chaos. Minute 17. Valverde clearly stepped on Lamine Yamal in the build-up to the 0-2. No VAR review, no reaction. The images are clear. Would it have been ignored if it happened the other way around? Minute 37. Varane was through on goal and Tchouaméni pushed him. Last man. A clear dogso. Red card. Only a yellow was shown. Minute 80. Tchouaméni blocked Varane's shot with a blatant handball. No penalty given. VAR called the ref, but only showed the worst angles. No penalty, no second yellow. Ridiculous. Minute 90. Fermin scored the 5th. The ball had touched his arm earlier, but then Valverde recovered, and Fermin stole it again to score. The goal was initially awarded. Then VAR called it back. It was overturned, wrongly according to the rules. Barca won, but they could have humiliated Madrid. A disallowed goal, a denied penalty, a red card not given. 3 decisions that not only favoured Madrid, they robbed Barca of a historic route. But the scoreboard doesn't lie, 4-3. And with that, La Liga is virtually Barca's. A scandalous season, a legendary comeback, an epic revenge against the giant from Madrid, and a masterpiece from the best coach in the world this season, Hansi Flick. But the true face of this season has a name, Lamine Yamal, the 17-year-old who is tearing down myths, breaking hierarchies, and humiliating, one by one, the so-called Galacticos. In this Clasico, he scored again, assisted again, and once again proved that the biggest stages are his natural habitat. When the world trembles, Lamine smiles. Mbappe, 5 matches against Lamine, 5 defeats, knocked out of the Euros, silenced in the Clásicos. It doesn't matter how fast he runs, how many millions he's worth, or how many goals he scores. He always loses to the kid from Rocafonda. Jude Bellingham, same fate. Lost the Euro final to him. Lost both domestic finals this season. Lamine has lifted 4 trophies right in front of the Englishman. Vinicius, 4 Clásicos this season, 4 defeats. Yamal hasn't just outplayed him, he's crushed him with character. While the Brazilian shouts and loses his cool, Lamine answers with goals and smiles. This kid doesn't respect hierarchies. He doesn't ask for permission to sit at the table with legends. He is the future, but he's also the present. He's the father of the Galacticos. And while Hansi Flick's Barca tears down Ancelotti's legacy and closes the most successful era in Real Madrid's recent history, Xabi Alonso is already preparing to land in Chamartín. But he better be ready, because this Barca has no intention of giving up the throne. What's coming isn't football anymore, it's war, and Lamine is already sharpening his fangs.